I went to a comic show, picked up a few comic books. We'll take a look at what I grabbed. And we're also going to take a look at the interesting career of a comic book creator who was nominated for an Academy Award for adapting his own comic book. Who was that? Let's talk about that next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, like, comment, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. Check out the description of this video. It's got links to my eBay store, my email, my whatnot, my Instagram. And I would just like to thank you for stopping by. Appreciate all the comments and thumbs up. And just appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to watch this video. So, fortunately, living in the New York City area, there are access to numerous comic shows almost every weekend. And this weekend was no different. Sunday morning, I headed out to Long Island for the monthly Route 110 comic show in Melville. This time I didn't get lost. Okay, I think I had the directions right this time. We're headed to the Route 110 show in Melville, Long Island. Last month, I got lost. I think I made the right here instead of the left because I had put the wrong address in. So here I am behind this tractor trailer. Okay, we're headed to the show now. It is, yeah. Oh, look, there's even a sign that says comic book show today because they're like, Jim, don't get lost this month. And it's right in here, comics. So we're pulling in and we're gonna go to the show without getting lost. So we've arrived to the show without incident. I am late because I had to get gas in the tank and I had to stop by the ATM, but here we are at the nice the Route 110 comic show. So there was some music in the background. I couldn't really use the audio there, but you'd see MC Squared had some pulps out there. Pulps have become really popular, and I guess ever since CGC said they were going to grade them. So he said he had just been accumulating pulps recently. There were some magazines. Those are always kind of useful to look through because you never know what's in there. The thing is, a lot of vendors don't bring them because they're awkward to store and to carry. So I was just kind of looking through real quick. And looking at the wall books, there was a Kiss in an 8.5. Somebody was asking about that while I was at his table. And, you know, there were more toys than a lot of other shows, and we'll see more of that. There's Lone Wolf. He had a really nice wall. He has some really cool Golden Age books on his wall. And, you know, there's a wall here. Just trying to give you a sense. Somebody with Funko Pops in the corner. More Pops on this side. There were some younger folks there, which is always good. There was a guy there with two little kids. And you know, we got, what, a He-Man and a 9.8. And first Power Girl. These guys had a really big setup. And you can see some Golden Age books there. Green Mask and a 7.5. I think I've actually seen these books on Elite Comic sales, or Elite on Instagram. They had some big boy books, and they had some Golden Age, but nothing that I really needed. And there wasn't any big books that really tickled my fancy here today. I will show you later one book, kind of briefly, that I was interested in, just because of the video that I dropped the other day. This vendor, Not From This Earth, he has a lot of Golden Age. Usually he also sets up at some of the Jersey shows. Here you see a pretty plentiful wall with clear prices, but some affordable books, like wall books under $100. Probably could have pulled some from there. And I like when the bins are really organized. I have bought a Justice League from this vendor. 25% off the wall books. I should have taken a closer look at some of those. But yeah, the DC organized separate from the Marvel. And then here it is in the upper right hand corner of this particular thing is Creepy #1 with that yellow cover. That's that horror magazine. I took a look at it, but the condition was just a little bit less than what I wanted. Early Green Lantern. I don't know. When I see fairly common books like a Wolverine 1, Wolverine 1 is an easy book to get. That really doesn't always pique my interest when I'm looking at walls. I'm looking at things like Silver Age or things that I haven't seen before. Maybe nice Silver Age books or high-grade bronze. And again, here's another vendor on 50-cent dollar bins. So we go around the corner. Some other vendors here that had a lot of toys. And it was a rather labyrinthian setup, but I think there was much more space to move around than we had last month. So, yeah, that was a pretty good taste of what we had at the show. Another vendor with there's a Joker 7.5. I have one of those. There was another vendor here that had just some books on the table, some magazines, and some other cool books. An early Hulk, Fantastic Four Annual 2. So you saw, I think this space was a little more comfortable this time. It looked like pretty much the same setup, but it didn't seem as crowded as it was last time. This is only the second time in this new venue, and I found I had room to move around. So I had I'd contacted and gone back and forth with a friend of the channel, Joe, who is from Long Island and is looking to purge some books. So he sent me some pictures, but as is the case, I had most of the stuff that he had. But there were two books that I needed. So like we ran into each other as soon as I walked in. I was a little bit late because I slept longer than maybe I wanted to. And I needed gas for my car. I stopped by the ATM. But anyway, he had a couple Action Comics. Pretty nice copies, 426 and 445. This is an interesting cover. I'm kind of interested to delve into that story with a Nick Cardy cover. At some point, I do want to talk about DC cover artists. Basically, they had, for many years, almost in-house cover artists. Like Nick Cardy did an insane amount of covers in the early 1970s, and Neil Adams was doing them in the late 60s. And it was very unusual for the artist who was known for the title to do the cover. Just strange. And at any rate, this I'm looking forward to. And if you're curious as to why these little stickers, when I put these into my personal collection and I have them in boxes that I label to read, which might be aspirational, because I do want to read the books. I put them kind of in chronological order. So the first book is from 1973, the other from 1975. And then he also had a couple other books I grabbed. Newsstand copies of Red Tornado #1. And the miniseries and Ambush Bug #1. So we made a deal for all four of those books, so that was good. And then I started walking around, and I didn't pick up a ton of books. I was more focused. I did pick up 2 copies of this book, which has been hot lately. I am still trying to catch up. My daughter and I are trying to watch the original X-Men animated series, and it's kind of been difficult to avoid spoilers. I think I've avoided the spoilers to a degree, but I've kind of intuited what's going on. Anyway, this is a popular cover by, which Kubert is this? Andy Kubert. So 2 of those, got those at a smoking good deal. Then I picked this book up. Pretty solid condition copy of the second appearance of Metamorpho in Brave and the Bold #58. So I got a nice deal on this one. It's a pretty solid copy. It looks great in the Mylar. And I need to just tape down the back, but that's not important right now. So that's going to go into my to-read boxes. We'll see when I ever get a chance to do that. And then I was really hunting for high-grade books. And so there were a lot of people there that I know well. Mike and Joe and Ex-Illusionary was set up there, and JC from Lone Wolf, and his wife Yasu. And, you know, I was just kind of going around. I spent more time talking than I did digging for the most part. But I was looking for high-grade books. And that's kind of been like high-grade copper. And I'm more going into high-grade bronze keys because I think books that make sense to get graded. Because that's part of the adventure here as well. I think all in, I think I spent $235 at the show. That includes the $5 to get in the door. And then what I like to do is figure out, well, how much money can I get out of it? So I'll give you, for instance, this is a high-grade copy. I'm going to clean and press this. I don't know when because I'm slow on my cleaning and pressing, and it's not even though the Craven movie is coming out, it's not a high priority for me. I think that this storyline has more significance than the movie, and maybe it would make sense. But this great Mike Zeck cover, and I think Mike Zeck is not yet gotten his due in terms of the quality of his work on its own. I mean, obviously people love the Secret Wars 8, but I mean, some of his work on Captain America and on Spider-Man titles. What's interesting is this head of a rhinoceros in the background. Considering the rhino is going to be, I guess, going against Craven in the movie. I don't know. But let's just say, for instance, that I'm able to get this in a 9.8. The fair market value of a 9.8 is about $260, which even when you put into the cost to get this graded, if I'm lucky enough to get the 9.8, it's paid for the entire day. So that's kind of my level of thinking. Then Lone Wolf had this gorgeous copy, and we made a really good deal for a couple bucks, of Adventure Comics 428. If you know me, I've been getting this book. This is hard to get in high grade. This is, I think, with a little clean in the press, it's definitely in the 9s. Does need like a little cleaning on the back and, press. There's a couple of tiny little ticks, but nothing too deep. It does have a little bit of the top there. That's probably the worst part of it. Hopefully I could get that. If I can get this in the 9s, it's definitely worth it. And it definitely becomes worth it. I've been speculating on this character, and it's kind of low in input spec. That if she is used in Justice League Dark, who knows? Then I picked up a newsstand copy of this Todd McFarlane cover of All-Star Squadron 47, The Origin of Dr. Fate. Really high-grade copy. Just maybe, I don't know if that bottom is enough to hold it back. It depends on the grader, and I might be able to improve that, not eliminate it with a good press. We'll see. That kind of hopeful for it. And probably wouldn't sell that because I love the All-Star Squadron run. And even if I get a 9.8, I'd love to have, just like I do with 25, a newsstand and a direct. So a few of these are, I talked about are going into the press pile. Then I picked up this. They're $5 books. This is a $5 bin. Thunder Agents. I'm kind of low-key working on this run. This Wallywood Tower Comics run. It's this superhero team. DC at one point, I don't know if they bought the rights. They did the archives of this. But that's just kind of a fun little crazy side project. First issue special. I don't know if I had this. This is a really solid copy of Lady Cop. And I'm wondering, off the top of my head, it's from 1975. And it brings, into account the idea of, so it's cover dated July 1975. So it would have been out in the early part of 1975. And sure enough, I'm positive now that this was inspired by the TV show Policewoman with Angie Dickinson, which premiered in September of 1974. I don't think they're doing a Lady Cop book without that. And I'm not even sure who worked on this book. That's a good question. Let me take a quick peek as to who I could open it up. Yeah, that's more fun to open the book up and take a look at the credits. I'm pretty sure DC didn't put their A-listers on the book. The cover is, there's no signature on the cover. So I think And it's, the story's by Robert Kanigher, who was more well known for writing war stories. There's the interior of the book. And the art by John Rosenberger and Vince Colletta. I don't know who John Rosenberger is. Oddly, the only other credit I can find for John Rosenberger is an issue of Superman Family. So, yeah, I guess he wasn't in the field too long. At least he wasn't doing stuff that I collected. Maybe he's doing some of the later romance books. That kind of would have made sense where they would draw somebody to do Lady Cop. Anyway, Captain America 192. This was a $5 bin. This is the first appearance of Carla Sofin, who becomes Moonstone, who was an original member of the Thunderbolts, but we all know that the Thunderbolts in the MCU is not going to be the Thunderbolts from the comic. Although, it would be an awesome surprise, because the Thunderbolts is getting that asterisk in the title. If, I don't know, they had like a secret team with the actual comic book Thunderbolts, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that. This is the final issue of The Adventures of Jerry Lewis. I just thought that was a fun little pickup. This originally, the title had been The Adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Then Dean Martin got his own book. Jerry Lewis did. Jerry Lewis's book outlasted Dean Martin's after their comedy team broke up in real life. And then I picked up this. There are like a few copies. I thought was the nicest. This is about a $100 book in a 9.8. Legends of the Dark Claw, the amalgam, and it's an amalgam of Batman and Wolverine. I picked up this. This is Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter, the final issue, number 18. And Ben Turner, who was premiered in issue number 1, in issue 18, he becomes the Bronze Tiger. Spec on Ben Turner. Again, I'm spending $5 on this. You know, it's not crazy spec, but it's just kind of fun spec. And I do have the entire, I do have the entire run of Richard Dragon now. That he is often a member of Suicide Squad, and he's also an African-American character, which, you know, is probably increases the probability of him being adapted to the big screen. And then I went digging through some bins, and I picked up some high-grade books that I'm going to put in my clean and press pile. DC Comics Presents 87, the first appearance of Superboy Prime. I really like this book. I already have it in a 9.8, but why not see if I can get another? It is a pretty pricey book in a 9.8. Wolverine, number 145. Right, this classic cover with the chromium claws. If you ever find it without the chrome, I think there was an error, but they call it the bone claws, but really it's just an error. That is a pricey book. There were some Transformers in there. None of the huge issues, but issue number 11 has some key significance. I'm not a Transformers guy because, as I said, like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, all that stuff, I'm sure they were wonderful properties, but by the time they were on Saturday mornings, I was sleeping till noon. I'm too old to have watched this on Sunday mornings. So, yeah, I'm not sure the key significance of this, but again, this also is a pricey book, well over $100 in a 9.8, and this is a very clean copy. And then I was going through bins and just picked up a couple of upgrades. A nice sharp copy with this Joe Kubert cover of Justice League of America 72. I thought that was, you know, I'm trying to get my JLA collection kind of, if I can, in higher grade, you know. So that, I think, is an upgrade. I do have to go through the collection and see what's what. And then the penultimate book I have here is a copy of, what do I have in the back here? Yeah. A copy of Justice League of America number 80. This is a very sharp, very clean copy. I mean, this is into the nines with a clean and a press. No question about it. Everything is really tight. There's a little bit of dirt. There's a little bit of non-color breaking spine ticks on the white that could be taken care of. So I don't think I'm going to clean and press this, at least not right away. Maybe when I put my whole Justice League collection together, I'll start to submit some books. I have never submitted a single issue of Justice League of America to be graded. I collect it. And I just haven't. I will. at some point. So here's the book I'm talking about. And have you been able to answer my trivia question? So this is a book by a comic book writer-artist, and it is an independent book, who adapted one of his stories into a feature film and was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Academy Awards. You figured out who it was yet? Well, this is one of the issues of that series. This is not one of the issues that led to the story that was adapted, but it is Eightball by Dan Clowes. Issue number 5. Not an easy book to get in the wild. And I collected this when it came out. So I have most of the issues, but oddly, there are a few that I'm missing. Now, some of them I'm missing because I might not be missing, but they might be in other parts of my collection because some of the later issues were larger format sizes than a standard comic book, so it's not like in my back issue bins and such, when I organize my collection. But when I did organize my collection, now this 8-ball ran for, I'm going to say 20, hold on a minute, I'll double check, 23 issues. But it took a long time, over the course of 16 years. It ran from 1988 to 2004. It did come out 2 or 3 issues a year for, about the first 15 issues, and then it was very intermittent. So Clowes has this kind of very a style that's very attributable to the underground comics of the 60s and 70s, influenced obviously by Robert Crumb, and it kind of has this very weird tone that I enjoyed. This was published by Fantagraphics. This is issue number 5. This was in the $5 bin, so that was great, and it came out in 1992. And it has kind of this very plain, almost dull line work. He did work with the Hernandez brothers on Love and Rockets. He did do some stories there, and he created a character, Lloyd Llewellyn. And then Fantagraphics started publishing 8-ball, which were his own stories. So Terry Zwigoff was the director who directed the documentary Crumb, The Life of Robert Crumb. And I definitely suggest you take a look at that film if you haven't already, if you're into underground comics at all. And if you even like any, you want to expand your knowledge of the history of comics beyond just the capes and cowls crowd, beyond, just your Marvel, DC, Crumb had a big influence on comic books. I think the documentary came out in 1997, and Gene Siskel had it as the best movie of the year. And it definitely was one of the best movies of the year. I watched it. I really enjoyed that film. So what Zwigoff did then in 2001, he adapted a screenplay that Clowes had written based on stories that appeared in 8-ball numbers 11 through 15, Ghost World. And those collected stories, then he created the screenplay. It was a movie that Zwigoff directed, starring Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson as these teenage best friends who are kind of like outsiders. And there's, with Clowes' work, there's always kind of an odd, ironic sensibility to it. And full disclosure, I have yet to see Ghost World. And that's, I'll tell details of that in a minute, because that is a similar adventure in my movie watching as it in my comic book reading. And it was very acclaimed. And it did get the one Academy Award nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay by Clowes. Then subsequently, Zwigoff directed another Clowes work, which was Art School Confidential. And that came out in what year was it? And I also have a bunch of Clowes graphic novels like that. Some of them are from the 8-ball stories, but his stuff is weird. It's weird, but it's very compelling. And I'd say there's kitsch to it. You know, he plays into kind of visual tropes of like the 50s and 60s, and uses that kind of as his background, but then there's grotesquerie that grows out of that. And it is for adults. So if you're under 18, hold off. I can't say that you should watch it, read it, but I would, if you're interested, if you can find it, check out Eightball. It's one of those independent books from the 80s and 90s that is often overlooked, but it did lead to a major motion picture. And with the documentary Come and with the Harvey Pekar film, American Splendor, which starred Paul Giamatti, there was a whole time where underground comic books were adapted into motion pictures, full-length, wide-release motion pictures. At a time when superheroes were struggling, right? When maybe you had X-Men and Spider-Man and Blade coming out, but, you know, well before the MCU. So, full disclosure. So Dan Clowes, very interesting career. You know, not a guy that you're going to see, you know, drawing Spider-Man or Batman, but a part of the hobby that really is interesting. So this particular title, Eightball, I don't have issue 2, 6, and I'm not sure about 19 to 22, because I think some of them, especially 19 to 22, may have been non-standard comic book size. And when I went through my collection, I have a whole bunch of that kind of stuff that, I mean, and not even like magazine size, like somewhere in between, like where do you put it kind of parts of the collection that I'm looking to complete. And it's hard to complete the title in the wild. You know, I was kind of digging through the boxes and I saw a couple of issues of Eightball, and I'm checking my CLZ app, like which ones do I need? Now, these were all standard comic books. So, you know, this was the only one I could find that I needed for the collection, and I was really happy to get it. So in the comments below, let me know if you've seen Ghost World and if you've read any of Dan Clowes' stuff. It is an interesting part of comic books. And, you know, I think as it was a point that it came out, I guess when I was still in college or just graduated college, and I read some of his stuff in college, and a point where, you know, you get introduced to the medium as a kid, and you read, you know, whatever you read, whether it's the superheroes or sci-fi, you know, the sword and sorcery or westerns or war or horror, whatever your introduction to it is, even if it's Mickey Mouse or Archie, and then you start to branch out and look at other stuff, and you know, as you're a maturing reader, I still enjoyed the superhero stuff. I still do to this day. But I was fortunate enough to have kind of grown up with the maturation of the comic book industry, with Watchmen and Dark Knight and Miracle Man and, you know, the Frank Miller, the Alan Moore, all of that stuff that came out in the mid 80s that really kind of moved the industry in a more adult direction. And I don't necessarily mean just, you know, R-rated topics, but stuff that resonated more with adults, that had more themes that a more mature reader, an older reader would be interested in. And then you start to gravitate towards other things. And, you know, you talk to other people, other comic book collectors. What are you reading? What's interesting? And then you find some other stuff and you go with it. And that was one of the things I really loved Clowes' work, and I collected all of it, or I tried to collect all of it. And so, you know, not an easy run to collect. I'm sure I could probably go on eBay and finish it off, but at this point, I'm just kind of still, you know, satisfied with looking for it in the wild. Yeah, a really interesting cartoonist, an interesting career, and it had a major impact on popular culture. You know, I can't think of anybody else who wrote created a comic book, and then wrote an adapted screenplay that was nominated for an Oscar from a comic book. And maybe there have been some, like, was The Adventures of Titian nominated for Best Screenplay, Adapted Screenplay? I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. If you have any details, let me know in the comments below. I can't think if anything was From Hell or The Road to Perdition, maybe. I don't know. Well, if From Hell was adapted, it certainly wasn't adapted by Alan Moore. How about Road to Perdition? I the feeling that got enough acclaim that, let's see. Nope. It was not nominated for Best. Let me just double check. Editing, sound, score, cinematography, art direction, supporting actor. No, it was not nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. So, interesting. Tyler Hoechlin was in that? Huh. Gotta play Superman now. I haven't seen that yet. And this goes to the next part of my journey, right? So I said earlier in the video, and I might have referenced this in other videos in the past, right? This is going into my personal collection. It has this little sticker that says 92 on it because it is a 1992 book. So I'm going to put it, when I put it in my to-read boxes, they'll go in chronological order for the most part. And then when I have time, I don't know when I have time. When I have time and I get to read all these books, I'm kind of, you know, I'm a little bit anal about this. I want to go in chronological order. And for my entire adult life, that's what I've done with movies. So this is how I watch movies. When I was right out of college, my buddy and I, you know, our guys' night, we'd get together on Sunday night, and if we didn't go out to the movies, we'd rent a couple of movies because he was working all weekend at a supermarket. You know, we didn't really have professional careers just yet. And silly me, I wasn't teaching yet. Otherwise, I'd be retired and doing comic books full time right now. But that's okay. So, any rate, we'd rent a couple movies, and we ended up we'd go to the video store, and we'd rent like a bad comedy or just something. We'd avoid the classics. It never came to us like, oh wow, this won Best Picture in 19 whatever it is. It was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. This is like a classic. Let's watch this. Never did that. But what we would do is, and it was also Sunday night, we'd watch The Simpsons and Get a Life. I said, you know what? I have not seen the classic movies that came out during my childhood because I was too young to see them. The movies that are made for adults that a 6-year-old me wouldn't have appreciated or understood or be allowed to watch by my parents. So I decided to go 20 years back in time. And that was probably based on my favorite show at the time. One of my all-time favorite TV shows was The Wonder Years. And The Wonder Years started being broadcast in 1988, and it flashed back to events from 1968. And I specifically remember there's an episode where he ended up going to the movies and seeing Romeo and Juliet. I'm like, oh, that's from 20 years ago, right? So I said, you know what? In 1990, I started watching movies from 1970. I got a book of, about the Academy Awards, and I started building a list based on Academy Award nominees and then top 10 lists and then actors and directors whose work I wanted to see, and then just going through other stuff. And I had reference books at the time, like Leonard Maltin's TV Movie Guide, and I started really going through that and making lists of movies that I wanted to see. So 1990, I was watching movies from 1970. 1991, I started watching movies from 1971, and so on. And so all these great movies, and really my favorite, and I'm really getting off on a tangent here. You can skip through this if you're not interested in movies, but my favorite era of films is the early 1970s because Hollywood had the freedom of the subject matter because of the motion picture rating. They could have R-rated movies. It was not possible 10 years earlier or even 5 years earlier. You had these movie directors that were coming from film schools like George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, etc. You also had some very old veterans, but were injecting something new into movies. And you also had the technical freedom to do more on location. The studio system was breaking down, and to really deliver more gritty subject matter. So the early 1970s is one of my favorite eras of movies. So I was seeing all of these great films. I've seen a lot of terrible films too, but that's part of the journey. And so then I decided, about 10 years into this experiment, that when am I ever going to see movies from before 1970? So I went back to the silent era and started watching movies from the teens and 20s and 30s. And now I'm at the point where I'm not quite 20 years behind. I'm like 3 or 4 years behind. But what I'll do is I'll go in 50-year increments, right? So I finished watching my list of movies from 2000. Now, one of the things with like streaming and YouTube and everything else, there are more movies available to watch, which is good news. The bad news is I have more movies that I'm available to watch. Often these movies that were harder to find years ago are absolutely terrible. But I enjoy bad movies as well. So I watched 2000, and then I go back to 1951. And then I'll do 2001, and I'll see Ghost World, and then I'll go back to 52, 2002, and so on. And then I'll kind of circle back as I'm watching that and either rewatch films I loved from previous years, or films that I was not able to access. I couldn't find at the time. So that's my movie watching journey. It's very anal, much like my comic book collecting journey. That's who I am. I'm reading comics. I get new comics. I put them away to read, and I'm 14 years behind in reading comic books. So, any rate, that's my story. Let me know, how crazy you think I am. But let me know if you've seen Ghost World, if you're familiar with Dan Clowes. I hope you enjoyed this video. I didn't take too much of your time up. And you can watch a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.